Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. Welcome to our beautiful City Hall, Council Chambers. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilman Ferry,
Present.
Councilman Figueroa, Councilwoman Fonseca, present. Councilwoman Gonzalez,
Present.
Councilwoman Reicher,
Present.
Councilwoman Rosano Siegel,
Present.
Councilman Cordero.
Present.
We have quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you. Will everyone please rise for the pledge of allegiance? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item, Madam Clerk.
Mr. President, we have two people signed up for public comment. Mr. Al Romanowitz.
Now,
Public comment.
the licensing board goes first. Okay.
This is obviously related to the council meeting.
The licensing meeting.
Just a couple.
Sir, could you just state your name and your address
Yeah,
for the
my
record?
name's Al Romanowitz. I live at 303 Central Street, Central Falls. My comments are on, obviously, the resolution. It's item 4 on, it was good, interesting, because I looked at the whole packet. It was interesting simply because the packet contains the usual, what I consider statistic versus statistic thing. Okay? And basically it's expert versus expert in a lot of instances. And obviously the one that the author disagrees with is always either a claim, you know, or something else, and the other one that you agree with is labeled the truth. Okay, so there, you know, it was just interesting. But there was one statistic there that basically said 80% were non-compliant with the law. And I guess my question is, okay, if they weren't compliant, why weren't they prosecuted? And the other piece of this is, I don't know if anybody in this city, okay, and I'm just talking about the city, basically, is paying the actual minimum wage in this instance. So if you don't know that, you should. Okay? And again, the minimum wage discussion is a long one, both for just the tipped and non-tipped. Okay? One last comment, our president who sits down in DC and always tells me he has a phone and a pen, and if he went to a piece of the tax code, right, he would find something that would actually help by raising the minimum that would be basically exempt from taxation on tips on a monthly basis. I don't think, obviously, I don't agree with this unless I see a lot more about discussion, so. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to just one thing out. We are going to discuss both sides, by the way. We're going to get two sides of the coin, but not all tonight. The other side is going to be the owners of restaurants. No one can attend tonight, so we're going to have next meeting address both sides.
That was my question.
Yeah, that's going to come under discussion, but that won't be voted on tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have Ms. Maria Giraldo. She's here for her license. I think she just signed up.
Oh, okay.
In the- That is all.
Okay, next item.
Resolution of the Central Falls City Council supporting legislation, House number 5364 and Senate number 291. That incrementally raises the $2.89 per hour on sub-minimum wage for tip workers between the years 2016 and 2020.
I understand we have a gentleman here that Colleen has, is it Mike?
Yeah,
Good evening, welcome
Thank
to
you.
Central Falls.
thank you so much for this, I really appreciate it.
If you could state your name,
Yes,
please.
my name is Michael Arujo. I'm the Policy Director for Restaurant Opportunity Centers United. I thank you for considering this resolution. It's very important issue. There is in fact an 86% non-compliance rate for tipped workers currently, as according to 2012 labor study of 9,000 restaurants in the region. Currently, people who work in this industry, the tips suffer rates of poverty that are twice that of the rest of the other workforce. They also suffer rates of sexual harassment 3 times that of the rest of the workforce. So I've made up some packets for the council to look over, and I'll submit those to you shortly. Currently, with the $2.89 sub-minimum wage, though employers are supposed to top off the employee, it puts the employee in such a precarious position to ask that oftentimes they don't. It's such a unique power dynamic between the server and the employer who would depend on for fair treatment and fair understanding that they often miss out on wages that they're due to. And yes, enforcement is definitely an issue and would be an important aspect of this, and in no way would we object to greater enforcement of this. However, realistically, with 22,000 workers, and if there's an 86% non-compliant rate, rates of enforcement would depend on the Department of Labor to be fully funded and staffed at levels that are probably not going to be staffed. I mean, this would be 10% of the workforce suffering under these conditions. It would be much easier to eliminate a second-tier wage structure and allow all workers to take part in this. The fact that there is the existing sub-minimum wage is an indication of the way we thought about people who serve our food historically, that we consider this to be women's work and the work of minorities and somehow valued less. It's also an unusual thing for an industry, it's the only industry that depends on the general public to actually pay the direct wage of the employee. This puts the employee in a position where they have to tolerate behavior that otherwise would be seen as unacceptable in any other condition and does not allow them freedom of choice in their own workplace. It also allows for unfair competition between employers. This is not a fair regime for employees. So I'm urging this council to pass a resolution in support of this bill, both Senate Bill 291 and House Bill 5364, because it will do much to lift the 22,000 workers who currently work for this wage out of poverty. It will do a great deal in the 7 states where it's been tried to reduce the rates of public assistance, which in their own service currently collects $632,000 a month in public food aid, and 50% of their, nearly 50% of their children collect free lunches, or qualify for free lunches. This is a population of people who are being consistently left behind since they haven't seen a raise in 20 years. Also, the second-tier system means second-class treatment, and that, as a basic issue of fairness, is one that we need to really consider. And so I thank you for giving this fair hearing, and I appreciate that the restaurant owners did not have time to come here, and I look forward to having the conversation.
Mike, before I turn it over to my fellow council members, your organization is?
Restaurant Opportunity Centers United.
Council members, questions? Steph?
Hi, thank you for being here. 2 questions. The first is, for the law that currently exists, why is it that the employee has to ask for that topped?
To be topped off.
Yeah, so why is the dynamic that the
Well,
employee has to say, hey, like, pay me the, the delta, like,
Right.
what I'm owed, instead of the employer just doing it?
Yes, sir. Well, there's 2 things that happen with that. Is that as an accounting issue for an employer to track, if it's an average size restaurant with 12 employees, they'd have to track 12 separate payroll schedules and track 12 individual paid rates per employee. So currently the sub-minimum wage is 30%. And so if you start at this baseline, and if one employee made another 45% of that or so, they would have to do additional accounting per employee. So instead of having a flat rate that was just paid, it increases burden on them. So what employers do, and this isn't no fault of theirs, this is just the nature of kind of the industry. And also, this would be the natural way that people do work, is that instead of topping off, they suggest doing other work or getting more lucrative schedules. So when you have somebody, instead of asking, they say, look, I didn't make my tips this week. Instead of saying, could you just make me up to my minimum wage, they say, could you schedule me for a Saturday? Or could you schedule me for a Friday night? And unfortunately, that is such an arbitrary system that it removes the employee from the ability to budget and schedule their own way of paying. So I mean, it's overly complicated for the employer, and it's a uneven power dynamic between the employee.
Is there a case of any employer that's been held accountable for it?
Sure. Yeah, actually, most recently, Cilantro Grill in Providence was fined for $100,000, but that was split between underage employment practices and wage theft. It's hard to track because the level of investigation isn't there unless there's like a large federal agency that can do the investigating. And the last report was done in 2012, again, at 9,000 restaurants with an 85 or 86% non-compliant rate. And I think it's just the nature of the industry. It's when you allow for an industry where an employee is only paid 30% of the actual minimum wage, you're allowing for room for abuse.
And then my last question is, what makes this law more enforceable than the one that
Well,
currently?
Two things really. First, because it's enforceable with the rest of the minimum wage, doesn't mean you have to have separate tracking regimes for each employee, which is currently what you have to do. So that would be the other. And the other obvious thing that makes it, this doesn't say that it's going to be a perfect solve all issues of wage theft and unfair payment practices. It will do a lot to make every person who walks into a room know exactly what they're going to get paid when they walk in. So for an employee to understand what their value is, they could say, well, I'm owed money today. And right now, because it's such a confused system, with credit card reporting being part of it, cash reporting being part of it, that the employee doesn't always know exactly what they're owed either. By saying I worked 5-hour shifts, I work this much, I know that's what I come home with at the end of the day, that makes it much easier to enforce.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do have a question. Good evening. Thanks for coming. Before you leave, could I get your business card?
Of course.
Thank you so much. So I did wait tables and I bartended and I was a chambermaid for several years, high school, college. And I can tell you that I never did have this issue and I never was asked to work different shifts to balance out my week. So I didn't have that experience, but that's not to say others don't. I just give you that balance. I did have a question though, how then are we going to handle tipping? So are you suggesting that the minimum wage goes up to the general? Because often that lower rate was because it was a function of our tipping, what we got tipped. So if you made your tips and you made your 20%, your 15, 20%, that was your minimum. So how do you see that affecting tipping?
Well, there's two things, three things. In Rhode Island, this wouldn't be an outlier issue. So if you go across the border in Connecticut, where the tip minimum wage for waiters is $5.60, the behavior of the tipping public doesn't alter when it gets to Connecticut. Like, people do tip the same. In Rhode Island, they actually tip on average 15 to 22%. In Connecticut, it's actually 18%, which may be a function of slightly higher wages there.
Well, you're talking average of state as well.
State,
And the eastern part of one state and the western part of one state are completely different
Right,
populations.
If you go to Hartford,
Mhm.
where you have the 560 and the 760 for bartenders,
Right.
you do see the same tipping behaviors as you would see in Rhode Island. Or if you go to California, if you go to San Jose Valley, which is the economically depressed area of California, and has an economy not unlike most of Rhode Island right now, where the tipping is a flat minimum wage right now. And so tipping behavior not only didn't change, actually got better because there's more money to go around. There's in the workers' pockets, they have to be out. So restaurants saw an increase in employment. They saw an increase in use of social services, obviously.
And I saw there were quite a few organizations that were supporting this, but I didn't see anything about like the SBA or any small business organizations. Have you reached out to them to ask them?
Yeah,
their
and
opinion?
unfortunately, the Rhode Island Hospitality Association and the Hoteliers Association have a zero position, which means there can be no increase, period. So any entrance into a conversation with us usually gets broken through them, and they are saying no, absolutely. Which is unfortunate, because through their own studies, restaurants that have adopted, in states that have adopted one fair wage, have saw an increase in their per capita restaurant expenditures as well as an increase in per capita hiring. To the tune of double digits, where states that have depressed or a two-tiered system have a increased rate.
Anyone else?
Sure.
Councilman Booker.
When this bill was heard at the State House, did you attend the hearing?
Yes.
And how many people were there? Sort of large crowd?
A lot of people were there from.
Pros and cons.
Cons outnumber the pros.
Where did the Chamber of Commerce stand?
They are against this bill.
They are against it. That's the problem I have is, you know, they give us this to vote on, and we don't hear both sides
Oh, of course.
of the
Of course.
argument. So thank you for coming.
But I will point out, though, that the Chamber of Commerce and the NRA, which is the National Restaurant Association, have done studies in the 7 one-fair wage states and saw an increase in their business. In fact, the Secretary of Labor, Perez, just this weekend, with the National Chamber of Commerce in Rhode Island, indicated that an increase in the minimum wage and an elimination of the sub-minimum wage has been a net positive that they support.
Just a quick follow-up. So how long in those other states have they been in effect? So have some real good data?
Yeah.
How long are we talking about?
California is, I think, 11 years now, and Washington implemented this year, so they're actually in the phasing period right now.
Mhm.
Minnesota was 7 years ago, although they might be eliminated, unfortunately. Nevada is 8 years. Alaska has been 10 years as well.
And so all of those, outside of Minnesota and Washington, California, Nevada, and Alaska,
Alaska.
so they're all positive?
Thank you again for being here. One question I had is, what effect would this bill have on a city like Central Falls?
Well, Central Falls' population, as you know, is largely comprised of people who work in restaurants right now. I mean, there's many of us. There's two things that happen with restaurant work, is that as an immigrant, which my family are, this is the work that we come into when we first come into the work. So often it's the first experience we have. So rising tides tend to raise every boat. Also, Central Falls being not one of the, oftentimes has been placed in the bottom of Rhode Island's economic ladder for various reasons, and not always appropriately. Partly because of the use of social services and social aid. By increasing wages for the workers, in general, you see decreasing use of those services. So the impact in the states and the impact in regions that have similar economies to Central Falls has been positive. So my proposition for you is that by supporting this bill and helping this bill get passed, you will see your net revenues increase. You will see greater stability with your population, which is significant. You will see fewer children on public assistance for lunch, and you will see fewer people collecting SNAP vouchers. I mean, this is currently a 30% wage regime means that we subsidize, the general public has to subsidize that.
Just one last thing about that. I guess because we are a city that has a lot of mom and pop restaurants, that is also, I think, a big concern. And I know I haven't had the opportunity, but Council President Ferry said that we would be given that opportunity to also speak with the businesses, so I think that's equally important.
Absolutely, and there's no denying that there are definitely good players in this. And with restaurants currently that do pay one fair wage, which there's a few in Rhode Island, do see that right now they're in economic disadvantage because of ethical behavior. Increasing and flattening out the wage has been good for large businesses and small businesses. The businesses that really tend to oppose this and do the driving of the opposition tend to be the large chains like the Darden restaurants and Denny's, McDonald's included in that, who don't have our local communities at stake, but they do say that it's the mom and pops that got hurt. we know that working people when they have money in their pockets spend that money. It doesn't go into an IRA, it doesn't go into shelters, it goes back into the community right away. So in the states, in places that have done one fair wage, they've seen greater economic activity. The prediction that our economists have put forward has been $32 million in the first year, and then concluding year would be $170 million of generated economic activity.
Anyone else? I thank you, and I'm going to be looking for a motion to table this item until we can contact our businesses, Broad Street, Dexter Street. I'm going to ask Sonia, the city clerk, to compose a letter to the businesses that do hire waiters, waitresses, etc. We certainly have to hear both sides of this coin. When we got this resolution, it was either Thursday or Friday. We did not contact any businesses, and again, that's the other side of the coin. In all fairness, I think they should have their say. So I'm basically looking for a motion to table until our May 11th, I believe. Is that the next meeting, or is that the holiday? Okay.
It's May 11th.
And you certainly, if they comply to May 11th, you're certainly welcome to come back and a little give and take with restaurant owners. So I guess with that, looking for a motion to table until the next council meeting. We have a motion by Ann, seconded by Stephanie and Ken. All those in favor, signify by saying. Please?
Councilwoman Gonzalez did not second. It was Councilwoman
It was
Gonzalez.
me, it's sorry.
Sorry.
It's my voice too. Sorry.
You're back.
I was thinking, did I actually
She's throwing her
speak?
voice. Anyway,
Sorry.
any further discussion on the table? Hearing none.
I would just add that, I know that Representative Regenberg was doing a lot of work in a grassroots manner to try to collect testimony from restaurant workers, and I think even having him here to provide some of his experience through his conversations would be helpful as well.
We will.
For May 11th, then I can certainly, either, any of us can certainly reach out, or I welcome you to do it as well, so.
We do have packets with worker testimony and our economic impact. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, all in favor by, signify by saying aye to table until May 11th. Aye. No nays, ayes have it, thank you.